Hello, and welcome, everyone. I am laughing because we were just doing selfies together up here. I am Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thanks so much for joining us for day one of a marathon couple of sessions we're going to have. It's called A More Perfect Union, our 3-day virtual festival. America didn't just happen. It was created in order to advance the human condition, to give rise to democracy, to sculpt a nation of opportunity, values, and rule of law. That experiment continues to this day, and while achievements abound, the idea that is America remains short of its promise. While staggering technological achievements in health, communication, space, energy, computing, manufacturing, transportation, and more, they're transforming our lives, and there's still too many struggling to put food on the table, though, to get health care coverage, to escape the isolation and bleak options that constrain communities that progress has ignored. America is worth the effort, I believe, always learning from the past, evaluating, reconsidering, debating, and improving, and that's what this is about today. We're going to spend 3 days here to look at these issues and bring a lot of voices together. We're going to be hosting conversations with people with diverging perspectives, including political leaders, policy innovators, and thought provocateurs. We will bring a number of viewpoints onto our virtual stage to discuss the most challenging issues of our day. If you feel uncomfortable with some of our people, that is good. We need to get out of our tracks. We need to get out of our heads a little bit. We need to be exposed to sometimes people who think and see things differently. That's what I hope we do as we're debating and sculpting and thinking about what a more perfect union means and should mean in this country. Each day will be divided into 3 segments. Rise is our morning briefing featuring the editors and reporters at The Hill in discussion with leading political and policy influencers to tackle big questions of consequence for America. Our afternoon segment, Focus, will take a deep dive into a single issue with one-on-one and panel discussions, digging into topics like digital infrastructure, cyber threats, and the economy. Some of it's going to be positive, I hope. It's just not all threats and depressing issues. And finally, Reveal. Our last session of the day will put tough questions in front of our nation's leaders and industry chieftains to determine how to move forward together. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Microsoft and Southern Company, for their support of this big festival and these great conversations. And I hope you get online and look at them all because they are fantastic. The team here has done an extraordinary job. I just want to thank my team because it's going to be cool. Before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at The Hill Events, The Hill Events. You don't have to really do that because I know that's a lot of characters. But do use the hashtag TheHillAMPU. AMPU stands for A More Perfect Union. We are broadcasting live and we'll be taking your questions throughout the program. And if you experience any trouble with the live stream, just refresh the page. Don't throw your computer out the window. Hopefully that will be the quick fix. Our first segment of the day will put the spotlight on our nation's cities. We're going to explore the evolving technology-driven cities of today and tomorrow and ask what it will take to make sure progress is sustainable, equitable, and really to understand the value and importance of cities and the architecture of our future. I'm happy to be joined by my great colleague, Julia Manchester. We were just taking selfies together up here. Julia is one of our leading correspondents at The Hill. She's going to help lead the conversations this morning. Julia, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Steve. I'm so excited to be here.
We always have fun with you. So, look, our first guest is Richard Florida. He's a great friend of mine. He's an author, professor, and co-founder of City Lab. It's a publication devoted to cities and urbanism. His most recent book is vital for you to read. It just really lays out the political landscape of this country. And when you realize he wrote in 2017, he was very prescient. It's called The New Urban Crisis, which explores the challenges facing cities today. Richard, so great to be with you, my friend. Listen, today, and what's exciting about this is to talk about a more perfect union. What does this look like? When you wrote your book in 2017, you talked about a tale of two nations that were sort of living next to each other. I'd love to kind of hear how you're looking at the nation today in this, I won't even call it the post-COVID, the COVID duration that we're still in, but how has it affected your map, so to speak, of how you think about the country and where we're going?
Well, Steve, thanks for having me. I'm a great fan of yours and a great friend of yours and a great fan of what you're doing at The Hill. So thanks for including me in this. Look, let's take it from your subject matter, a more perfect union. Where is our union broken? Right there in Washington, D.C., with this heinous, I would say heinous and horrifying polarized politics, which is dysfunctional. And if you look at polling data, I think it's about 20% of Americans have any level of faith and confidence in our federal government. Now, where I think the union is pretty perfect, where I think we can look at Tocqueville's America, is in communities large and small all across this country where I get to go and visit. Whether it's Milwaukee or Indianapolis, Bentonville or Tulsa, Pittsburgh or Boston, I could go on. Mayors, local leaders, public and private sectors and nonprofit sectors pulling together to rebuild and revitalize. And by the way, Steve, since we've last talked, I launched a podcast called The Mayors. I've now had the opportunity to speak to about 12.5 mayors, Republican and Democrat. And they're all the same. They all want the exact same things. They're all pragmatic and non-ideological. So if you ask me, from the point of view of Washington, D.C., we look pretty unperfect. But when we get on that ground level in our communities, we look like a real united cities or united communities of America. So I think that's where the rubber hits the road, and I think that's where we build our union.
Well, so one of my favorite mayors, I mean, I have a lot of favorite mayors out there in case mayors are watching this, but a lot of favorite mayors, like, love you all. But I've spent a lot of time talking to Francis Suarez of Miami, the mayor of Miami, what he's doing. So I don't know if he's been in your podcast list. And of course, in January, January, February, we always have the Conference of Mayors here in Washington. And I found the same thing. I'd just be interested in our audience understanding, what is a mayor like Francis Suarez, what does he's sort of, a centrist, pragmatic, but, if you peel that back, he's a Republican, but he's fascinating. If you kind of look at other mayors that are Democrats in the same, what are they trying to do? What do they want? What are they sculpting?
Well, I think Francis was the first mayor on the pod, partly because I spend the winter in Miami Beach, so I know the area very well. We've had all three mayors from Greater Miami: Dan Gelber from the city of Miami Beach, and Daniela Levine Cava, who's the mayor of Miami-Dade County, who has the deep pocketbooks. But look, Mayor Suarez has decided that he really wants to grapple with making Miami a tech hub and a greater global city. He's probably the best marketer mayor I have ever seen, and the best. I mean, the guy is a social media maverick. But yeah, and it's very funny. When we talked, he said, it was very interesting as a Republican. He said, and this was back right about when Joe Biden took office, about when you guys talked. He said, I've talked to Joe Biden's people a lot more than I've talked to Donald Trump's people, and I'm glad they want to help us. Yeah, I think whether it's a Francis Suarez, who's a Republican, or a Danielle Levine Cava, I could go down the list. They all want the same thing. They want to build thriving communities. And that's why I think, Steve, when you said, what's my map? I think the big issue confronting our country, and you and I have talked about this, but I want to lay it out there right at the beginning of this incredible conference you've organized, is that there's simply too much power in Washington, D.C. We talk about the tech titans and the oligarchs. Sure, that's important. But the big issue in America is the federal government and the imperial presidency have way too much power. And I think the big agenda item that needs to be done in our country is we've got to move power down. We have a federalist instrument that our founders gave us, which enables us to dial up power to the executive branch when we needed to, maybe during the Industrial Revolution and the New Deal. Now we got to dial it back down. And I think if we want to make a perfect union or a more perfect union, we've got to take power out of Washington and give it back to community. And I don't just say cities, suburbs and rural areas, red and blue. We have to empower people to live the kind of lives they want and not get in their faces. So I think this idea of devolving power to the local is the way to really create a more perfect union.
Richard, I don't know if you've looked at it in the City Lab world, but in the infrastructure bill, which is pending and been written, and I've heard the same thing from many leaders around this country at the non-federal level, but I said, what do you most need? And they say in this infrastructure bill, and they say, we need them to understand that we know how to program this money better than they do in D.C. So I'm just interested in whether any of your folks have looked at the infrastructure bill. Does it give that empowerment at the local level, the state level, the city level for that to happen?
It needs to. And I think the federal technology hubs part of the bill gets us there. I'm actually writing something on this right now. Steve and folks, I was very big in the industrial competitiveness movement, working with the Council on Competitiveness, with the big corporate interests in America and our government back in the 80s and 90s to put our country on the right foot and rebuild our industries. And we did it. I now think we have to shift to place-based competitiveness. If you want my bottom line on this, if the industrial corporation was the key to creating a strong economy back in the days of my dad and the great factories, our cities and our communities, our metropolitan areas are the cornerstone of competitiveness. That's where our innovation really comes from, this collaboration where talented people and ideas come to mate and thrive. I think we've got to put an emphasis on place-based competitiveness, and I think that's what the bill gets us started doing. But the more power that can be devolved to the metropolitan level, these conglomerations of cities and suburbs and rural areas, the more they can define what's needed, the better off we'll be.
Richard, you tweeted out recently, you write, the more I watch the reactionary policies raining down in Texas and Florida, the more I'm confident coastal superstar cities and tech hubs are going to be just fine. Tell me what's on your mind.
Well, first of all, I'm a part-time resident of Florida, and I love the state. My great collaborator and colleague, Stephen Pedigo, runs the LBJ Urban Lab in Austin, in Texas. He wrote a great piece for the Times on why Texas is the future. I think that Texas and Florida could have a great future if they stop with this reactionary nonsense. And here's why. I think that these techies tend to be, and the tech talent, not the tech titans, the tech talent tends to be pretty fiscally conservative, pretty economically conservative. They like to keep their money. They don't like high taxes, but they're also very socially progressive. When I wrote my book, Rise of the Creative Class, back in 2002, techies at that time were telling me they look for places that have great women's rights, great gay rights, not because those issues are central to their hearts, but because they signal a place that is more meritocratic and meritorious, where individual effort is rewarded. And I think that what some of the red states have been doing is creating this very anti-urban, kind of socially progressive posture, which is going to drive tech talent away. If they just dump that, they'd be fine. But look, in terms of where our tech hubs are, people have been talking about the rise of new tech hubs now for the past year during the pandemic. You look at the data, the San Francisco Bay Area is still number one by a large margin. And guess what's number two? New York City. Right. Austin has been building for a while now. Austin is no overnight sensation. It's been growing a tech hub for 20, 30 years. Miami's getting there, but really the dominant tech hubs remain what they were before the pandemic.
I was blown away I was in Austin this last weekend. I was just blown away. All right, just finally, Richard, and we'll play a little game here. I'm interested in the Richard Florida ranking of the best cities in the world today. And, just give us your top one or two. And then 10 years from now, project who you think will be the top one or two.
Well, I'm coming to you today from Toronto, and I think Americans should take a long look at Toronto because it's a city that's safe. And I think one of the things that's happening to American cities now is that crime and urban disorder are surging again. And I think that's partly a result of the pandemic and being pent up. You look at European cities like Copenhagen or Paris or even London, they don't experience some of these problems. What I'm really hot on today, in addition, I'm from New York, I love the city, is these smaller communities. You mentioned Austin, we talked about Miami. Right. The Tulsas, the Bentonvilles, the Omahas, the Kansas Cities. One of the things that I'm seeing in my travels is there used to be such a gap in terms of quality of life and amenity between the big superstar cities like New York and San Francisco and the small towns. Now I think that you can get those amenities anywhere. And with this powerful effort of people coming together and building these public-private partnerships, which really have rebuilding America, I think we're seeing a renaissance. So I think we're seeing communities across America, urban, suburban, and rural, all coming to the fore and all building a better union.
Well, listen, we'll have to leave it there. Richard Florida, founder of the Creative Class Group, author of Rise of the Creative Class and the New Urban Crisis, also co-founder of City Lab. It's a real pleasure anytime I get to spend time with you, and you're exactly the right person to start this conference with. So thank you so much, Richard Florida.
Thank you, Steve. Hope to see you in person soon. Thanks for having me.